are all facing unprecedented challenges. Imagine tonight at 10:45 on BBC One.
Later than billed, the BBC News at 10 now with Fiona Bruce. Tough new rules for travellers to England, increased testing, big fines and the threat of prison. Travellers to England from a list of countries will have to pay over £1,700 to quarantine in a hotel for 10 days.
I make no apologies for the strength of these measures, because we're dealing with one of the strongest threats to our public health that we've faced as a nation.
The new rules start on Monday. We'll be looking at them in more detail and what they could mean for summer holidays. Also tonight, a WHO investigation concludes coronavirus didn't originate from this lab in China, but can't say where it did come from.
Hear ye, hear ye, hear ye.
Proceedings get underway as the second impeachment trial of Donald Trump begins in the US Senate.
Oh, what a beauty!
Celebrations for England as the underdog wins through to take the first test against India. And Motown legend and co-founder of the Supremes, Mary Wilson, has died.
And coming up in sport on BBC News, results from tonight's FA Cup as Bournemouth make the quarter-finals for the first time in over 60 years. They knock out Premier League Burnley.
Good evening. The government has unveiled tough new quarantine rules for anyone arriving in England from outside the UK, including fines and the threat of jail for people who flout the rules. The measures are designed to keep coronavirus variants out of the country. All travellers are already required to have a negative COVID test before they arrive. From Monday, all passengers will have to self-isolate for 10 days and be tested on day 2 and day 8. Those arriving from the 33 countries on the government's red list will be taken to a hotel, where they have to stay for 10 days at a cost of £1,750. And if people violate the rules, they could face large fines and potentially up to 10 years in prison. Scotland has gone one step further and confirmed that anyone returning from abroad will have to enter a quarantine hotel. Here's our transport correspondent, Caroline Davis.
When Liz Matos travelled to Portugal in September when her father died, she didn't know she would be facing 10 days in a quarantine hotel when she came back. Liz can't return until her father's house is sold in late February, which means she'll have to pay £1,750 to quarantine in a hotel.
It's extortionate. I think it would be really, really depressing, on top of being quite miserable anyway. We're coming back not from a nice holiday, but from, grieving for either a lost one or ill families, etc. So I think this needs to be considered in how they treat people.
Today's announcement introduced further restrictions on international travel, including higher fines and potential prison sentences.
I know that most people have been doing their bit, making huge sacrifices as part of the national effort. And these new enforcement powers will make sure their hard work and sacrifice isn't undermined by a small minority who don't want to follow the rules.
Under the government's policy, only those arriving from countries on the UK's red list will need to quarantine in a hotel. But Labour want the policy to apply to arrivals from every country.
He hasn't announced comprehensive quarantine controls at the borders. So why then, when over half of countries where the South African variant has been identified, why are over half of them not on the so-called red list?
Holidays are currently illegal, but it seems many of us are already thinking about the summer sun. Holiday firm TUI say they've already had nearly 3 million bookings for the summer, and many in the industry are already viewing the season as vital for their survival. Many in the airline and airport industry are worried. The more restrictions that are added on, they think it could take longer for those to be removed, particularly in time for the summer.
We just don't know where we're going to be over the next few months. It's just rapidly changing. But what we do know is there's just huge amount of demand and pent-up demand for people to go away this summer.
But the policy won't be the same everywhere in the UK. While England and Wales will only require arrivals from banned countries to quarantine in hotels, Scotland will require all international arrivals to do so.
The UK Government has only committed to adopting this for travellers returning from red list countries. We know that is not sufficient, and we have therefore gone further.
In Northern Ireland, discussions are still ongoing. The travel industry can't be ramped up overnight. It needs some warning about when international travel might start again. Both it and potential passengers are waiting to see whether summer travel can go ahead.
Well, that's the big question, isn't it, Caroline? I mean, this is all open-ended. We don't know how long it's going to last. So what could it mean for summer holidays?
It is open-ended. We don't know when it's going to finish. The answer is we just don't know about summer holidays yet, and that's because there are quite a few things to consider. So firstly, let's look at the vaccine programme. That's going relatively well in the UK, but that's not the only thing that matters. The Transport Secretary has previously mentioned that looking at vaccination levels in other countries that passengers in the UK might want to travel to is also important, and of course that's not in the UK's control. Then you also have to think about considerations for where new variants might come from. When we've seen country bans, we've not just seen countries where the variants have started being banned, we've also seen some hub countries where people travel from those variant countries onto the UK being banned as well. So, for example, when the Brazilian variant happened, flights from Portugal were also banned too. So that's another complication, looking at countries, but also looking at the countries that fly into those countries as well. It's a very uncertain picture for the travel industry at the moment. We heard earlier today that travel company Jet2 have taken the decision to extend suspension of flights and holidays until the 14th of April. The travel industry in general are just desperate to know how we get out of this and when.
Aren't we all? Caroline, thank you very much. Scientists from the World Health Organization investigating the origin of the pandemic say that coronavirus is extremely unlikely to have leaked from a Chinese laboratory, but they were less clear about where the virus did come from. They presented their findings at a news conference in China after travelling to Wuhan, where the first case of coronavirus was recorded in December 2019. Our correspondent John Sudworth reports from there.
It's one of the most important questions of our time. Where did the virus come from? But the scientists had more to say about what they hadn't found than what they had.
It has not been possible to pinpoint any animal species as a potential reservoir for this disease, and it doesn't look like there was wide circulation of the virus in any animal species in the country.
China's wet markets were once thought to be the prime suspect, where the virus was most likely to have jumped from animals to humans. This market, linked to some of the earliest cases, was a particular focus, but with animal tests said to be negative, the team has come up with another theory. Frozen food, and an idea China itself has been promoting in recent months. The virus, they suggest, may have travelled to Wuhan on imported frozen produce. The WHO arrived here insisting this was going to be all about the science, and yet signs of the politics have been there every step of the way. From the wrangling about access and timing, from the team's reliance not on its own investigation but on data provided by China. The questions about how independent these findings really are from China's own narrative are unlikely to go away. Locally, it's a narrative that's taken hold. On the banks of the Yangtze River, this fisherman says he's heard that the WHO is in town. It's impossible for the virus to originate from here, he tells me. It came from overseas.
No interview. This is a press conference. Yes. I'm allowed to ask questions. People are taking photos.
After the press conference, Chinese officials tried to stop any interviews, concerned perhaps that they might lose control over such sensitive issues, and few more sensitive than this. Some scientists believe the virus could have leaked from this laboratory known to have been experimenting on coronaviruses. But China had little to fear from the scientists we were able to speak to. Some have been calling the lab leak theory a conspiracy from the start.
Given that this report rules out a lab leak, isn't your credibility on that somewhat undermined by the fact that you were ruling it out before you even came here?
A very large group of experts have looked at this. They've been to the various labs around the region, talked to people, asked critical questions, got critical answers, and they've come to their conclusion, and I have as well. And what they say is extremely unlikely, and that stands alone.
COVID devastated this city first, and for now its origins remain almost as much of a mystery as before.
When asked why they'd ruled out a lab leak, Fiona, the team said it was because no records exist showing any virus similar to SARS-CoV-2 in any laboratory here in Wuhan. Now, some scientists, of course, will point out that not everything that happens in labs is published, and that all this leaves one big question unanswered. How did a highly infectious disease travel all the way to Wuhan without causing similar outbreaks along the way? China and the WHO think frozen food might be the answer. Not everybody's going to agree.
John in Wuhan, thank you. Let's take a look now at the latest government figures, and they are showing another big fall in new infections. 12,364 new infections were recorded in the latest 24-hour period, the lowest figure since the 8th of December. An average of 17,075 new cases were recorded per day in the last week. The number of people in hospital remains high across the UK. 26,723 patients with coronavirus. Deaths remain high too. 1,052 deaths were reported in the past 24 hours. That's of people who died within 28 days of a positive COVID test. On average in the past week, 834 deaths were announced every day. The total number of UK deaths is now 113,850. As for the vaccination programme, more than 350,000 people had a first dose of one of the 3 approved COVID-19 vaccines in the latest 24-hour period. And that takes the overall number of people who've had their first jab to 12.6 million. Now, new figures show that deaths from coronavirus in care homes in England and Wales are continuing to rise, though at a slower rate than in previous weeks. Our social affairs correspondent Alison Holt is with me. So, Ali, why are these figures continuing to go? You expect they'd be beginning to come down?
Well, there's a 2-week time lag in these official figures. So they're telling us about what was happening in terms of deaths at the end of January. And the hope is that with the rollout of the first round of vaccinations in care homes, as well as infection rates falling in the community, that we will start seeing that having an effect. Still, these numbers are bleak. In the week ending January the 29th, the deaths of 2,505 care home residents were registered as involving COVID-19. That's a 6% rise on the week before. And it means that nearly 36,000 residents have died in care homes and in hospitals with COVID since the start of the pandemic. But it is important to say that the weekly number of deaths is still significantly below what we were seeing at the end of April. The rate of increase in deaths has also slowed compared with mid-January, and recent Public Health England data shows that the number of outbreaks in care homes has halved. So there are reasons for cautious hope that we are reaching the peak of this wave, and today we've had organisations representing care home residents, the relatives of care home residents, calling on the government to set March the 1st as a date for the restarting of visiting in care homes. They say they know there's a risk, but that families have been separated for far too long.
Alison, thank you. And there'll be a chance to get more answers to questions about coronavirus and the vaccine tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock on the BBC News Channel and the BBC Asian Network. And they'll be joined by England's Deputy Chief Medical Officer, Jonathan Van Tam. So do send in your questions using the hashtag BBC Your Questions, or you can email your questions at bbc.co.uk. Donald Trump's second impeachment trial has begun in the US Senate. The former president is charged with inciting insurrection in a speech to supporters ahead of the deadly riot at the US Capitol on the 6th of January. Impeachment is the process where a public official can be charged with high crimes or misdemeanours. They're then tried in the US Senate, although it's not a criminal trial. A 2/3 majority is required to reach a verdict, and it could lead to a ban on holding public office. Our North America editor, John Sopel, is in Washington for us. So, John, what's been said so far?
Well, the Trump legal team have tried to have the whole case dismissed on constitutional grounds that you can't impeach somebody who's left office. While we've been on air in the last few moments, senators have rejected that appeal from the Trump legal team. But the real significance is how many Republicans voted to have the case dismissed. And that would suggest that there's an unlikely chance that Donald Trump will be convicted by that 2/3 majority.
Hear ye, hear ye, hear ye.
In the building where a policeman and 4 protesters lost their lives, where the Trump-supporting mob ran amok last month, Donald Trump today went on trial.
On the question of whether Donald John Trump is subject to the jurisdiction of a court of impeachment.
Charged with inciting an insurrection at the Capitol, the most serious accusation ever levelled at an American president. The Democratic Party prosecutors setting out a vivid and searing video timeline. Leading the Democratic team is a congressman who'd buried his son the day before the riots, and he'd persuaded his wife and daughter to come to the Capitol to witness American democracy and the peaceful transfer of power.
She said, "Dad, I don't want to come back to the Capitol." Of all the terrible, brutal things I saw and I heard on that day, and since then, that one hit me the hardest. That and watching someone use an American flagpole with the flag still on it to spear and pummel one of our police officers ruthlessly, mercilessly.
If Donald Trump is to avoid conviction, it won't be because senators will forgive or condone his behaviour. Instead, it will rely on a constitutional argument that you can't impeach a former president. The Trump legal team, though, seem to be struggling to make their case.
That I don't know about off the top of my head, but each one of them, once there was the vacuum created that the greatest deliberative bodies, the Senate of Greece, sitting in Athens, the Senate of Rome.
The beating heart of US democracy is now padlocked and chained. There are miles of fencing and razor wire and literally thousands of deployed National Guardsmen. This is Fortress Congress. Beyond the heavily guarded perimeter, a few protesters are making their point. A far cry from what the Trump-supporting insurgents found a month ago when they'd taken the former president at his word.
We fight like hell, and if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
The Trump defence is that his speech was figurative and not literal. But the new president is trying to put maximum distance between himself and what's unfolding at the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue.
The Senate has their job. They're about to begin it. I'm sure they're going to conduct themselves well, and that's all I'm going to have to say about impeachment. So thank you very, very much.
Since leaving office, Donald Trump has spent more or less every day playing golf. But you can be sure that today he'll be watching, and closely. John Sopel, BBC News, Washington.
Police in Myanmar have used rubber bullets and water cannons to try to disperse protesters during a 4th day of demonstrations against last week's military coup. The demonstrators have defied a ban on gatherings to take to the streets of the capital, Naypyidaw. Tear gas was also fired at protesters in Mandalay, and a number of people were arrested. Demonstrators are calling for the release of the elected leader, Aung San Suu Kyi. The United Nations has criticised what it calls the unacceptable use of force against demonstrators, with the US government adding its condemnation too. From Yangon, our correspondent Nin Jiang Ai sent this report.
The army's patience is running out. Faced with days of peaceful protest, this is their response. Police using water cannons and rubber bullets to push back the crowds. Dozens are being treated for injuries in 2 cities, including security forces. A doctor told us they are treating 2 protesters with gunshot wounds, including a woman shot in the head. Here in Yangon, the biggest city in Myanmar, the situation is less violent, but every day the numbers are increasing.
have seen people from all different backgrounds, including the government staff. When I spoke to them, they are all fully aware of all risks, but they said the world must know what is happening in Yangon.
I'm involved as I am a civil servant, because I don't want the system where dictators rule by taking power unjustly.
I'm not afraid of persecution, because it's not like the old days. If we are afraid of protesting, then our children and grandchildren will live in fear forever. We need to fight with courage, risk our lives.
We keep on fighting until we get our president and Mother Aung San Suu Kyi back, whatever it takes. We are young people. We have greater knowledge. We can outsmart them. We will think about ways to avoid confrontation.
Arrests have started in some cities, and there's been a raid on Aung San Suu Kyi's party headquarters in Yangon. But as hundreds of thousands of people continue to take to the streets, the question is, how will the generals respond to the growing pressure at home and abroad? Nguyen Chan A, BBC News, Yangon, Myanmar.
Businesses may not be required to file their gender pay gap figures this year because of the pandemic. It comes as a committee of MPs looking at the impact of the pandemic on men and women found government policies for economic recovery were repeatedly skewed towards men. The government says it has spent more than £200 billion on support schemes. Our economics correspondent Darshini David reports.
Press on the top. At home in Bristol, copywriter Lucy's laptop is in demand.
Okay, Mia, can I just look for a job?
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Are you able to do some more stuff on there?
Yeah.
First, she was furloughed, a help when she was faced with homeschooling and a key worker husband. But then she was laid off, and job hunting isn't easy. A pandemic makes it hard to know what you can commit to.
I'm kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, really, because there are very few part-time roles out there, so most likely a job will be full-time. And in any new job, you have to prove yourself in the first 6 months.
In Manchester, landscape architect Nicola's a rare female face in construction.
I had a little boy, so I was due back to work in March. And then after 5 days of being back, COVID hit. And then I was furloughed for 6 months.
But once her furlough ended, she quit her job to set up her own business, concerned that extended time out would leave her sidelined.
It will set women back, because if people aren't being offered flexible working to be around the children or just a bit of give and take in terms of the situation that they face, women will get set back and they will get pushed aside. And sometimes they'll either leave because of mental stress or just walk away and find another job that's not necessarily in the career, that's not fair.
Today's report says government policy risks turning the clock back on gender equality, and that has been overlooked in plans for the recovery too.
It's not good enough to say, well, a recovery of the economy will help everyone. Yeah, that's important. But we know that some groups have been disproportionately hit. So I want to see some tailored packages that make sure we see retraining opportunities for women, particularly.
Parenting Forum Mumsnet say that 1 in 3 users fear that their careers have been set back by the pandemic. 3 out of 4 are concerned their voices aren't heard at the top of government. This report urges the government to compel big businesses to start reporting their gender pay gap once again. That was 9.6% last time. It's the difference between the average male and average female salary. It shines a spotlight on female progression. That was suspended last year. It may not return yet.
What we're trying to do is encourage employers to take action and encourage employers to still report and provide the information as much as possible. And we're supporting them in doing it. But enforcing it during this time in the midst of a global pandemic is something that doesn't seem right. So if we need to suspend the enforcement of it, then we'll probably do so.
From investment in childcare to greater protection for new mothers, the government is being urged to do more. But to help women's careers bounce back, we may all have to play a part. Darshini David, BBC News.
Let's take a brief look at some of today's other news. Cumbria County Council says it will reconsider its decision to give planning permission for a coal mine near Whitehaven following widespread criticism. Environmentalists say approval will undermine efforts to tackle climate change. The chairman of JD Sports has told the BBC that Brexit has turned out to be considerably worse than he feared, with red tape and delays in shipping goods to mainland Europe meaning double-digit millions in extra costs. Peter Cowgill said JD Sports may have to open an EU-based distribution centre to ease the problems in a move that would mean jobs are lost here in the UK. The investigation into the helicopter crash that killed the retired basketball star Kobe Bryant and his teenage daughter Janna has said that the pilot was not licensed to fly in cloud. 9 people died, including the pilot, when the aircraft crashed in cloudy conditions into a hillside near Los Angeles in January last year. A space probe launched by the United Arab Emirates has entered orbit around Mars, a first for the Arab world. Only 4 other space agencies, the US, Soviet Union, Europe and India, have made successful trips to the Red Planet. The probe will spend the next 2 years studying the atmosphere. Our science correspondent Rebecca Morell has more.
Mission accomplished. The United Arab Emirates has made it to Mars. After a tense wait in the control room, celebrations. As a signal sent from their spacecraft millions of miles away beams in.
It's like a weight of 7 years has been lifted from my shoulders on arriving to Mars. I'm truly looking forward to the scientific discoveries, and I truly hope this mission will impact an entire generation to strive to things that are even bigger.
The spacecraft is called Hope and has pulled off a make-or-break manoeuvre, firing its thrusters so it's captured by the gravitational pull of the Red Planet.
The Hope mission will see more of Mars than we've ever seen before. Its spacecraft has an elliptical orbit, swinging in closer and then much further away. At its closest, its flight path matches the rotation of Mars, so it hovers over some key features like Olympus Mons, the biggest volcano in the solar system. At its furthest point, the planet spins beneath it, giving it a much wider view. This means it will see almost all of the planet from both close up and from far away.
Arriving at the Red Planet is a huge leap for the UAE. Until now, the nation has only sent satellites into Earth orbit. This spacecraft will study the Martian atmosphere to solve a big mystery: how Mars transformed from a planet with water like Earth to the dry, dusty world it is today.
It's not the end of the journey for Hope. Reaching Mars is just halfway through the journey. We still have to do the science work, we still have to collect data, we still have to come up with new discoveries about Mars. And this mission is just, again, a starting point.
For the United Arab Emirates, they've made history, establishing themselves as a new space power. But they're not the only ones heading to Mars. Tomorrow, China's spacecraft arrives. Then next week, NASA's latest rover will attempt to land. The Red Planet is about to get busy. Rebecca Morell, BBC News.
England's cricketers have won the first test against India in Chennai. James Anderson and Jack Leach bowled England to a resounding 227-run victory. England were the underdogs at the start of the 4-test series, as Joe Wilson reports.
Well, old friend, of all the good days, this was one of the best. First, Chiteshwar Pujara, a concentration master, caught. England had one big wicket, needed more. Enter Anderson.
Oh, he's got him!
Shubman Gill out for 50. Same over, same bowler, same stumps.
Oh, doesn't matter.
Ajinkya Rahane gone for none. Watch the ball. Dip, swing, clatter. Is England's best ever bowler getting better? Well, Anderson lured Rishabh Pant into a mishit to Root for more proof. Already the entire hopes of India now relied on the eyes of the captain. Well, Virat Kohli was batting and battling, but who else? Leach found the glove of Ravichandran Ashwin, caught and gone, and not even Kohli could stop this. Dismissed by Stokes for 72. The surface is old, the ball can die, and that was the match. Jofra Archer finished it 192 all out. The win which Joe Root had batted into possibility was now complete.
We were in control of the game the whole way through, and the guys were exceptional. Today in particular, to bowl them out in that manner was fabulous. So A really pleasing performance and fills us with confidence going into the rest of the series.
This is an outstanding Indian team on home soil. England's win deserves the most serious sporting respect. Joe Wilson, BBC News.
One of the original members of the Supremes, Mary Wilson, has died, aged 76. The all-female group, which included Diana Ross, of course, was known for their hits such as Baby Love and You Can't Hurry Love. Their music became a defining sound of the 1960s. David Silito looks back at her life, and his report contains some flashing images.
Mary Wilson, The Supremes, Baby Love. You Keep Me Hanging On. You Can't Hurry Love. They were a Motown hit machine, 5 #1 singles in a row. Mary Wilson had formed the group with her friend Florence Ballard when they were teenagers, and they were joined by a neighbour, Diana Ross. And then they headed to the office of Motown in Detroit.
Eventually we got into the lobby, we'd sit into the lobby, and every day we'd do that until eventually they signed us. We pestered them to death.
So much has happened to me in the month of February.
60 years on, her death is a shock. She posted this only a few days ago, talking about her plans for the future. The singer Beverly Knight today paid tribute to a supreme titan of the music world. Berry Gordy, the head of Motown Records, described her as a trailblazer, a diva. Diana Ross said she was thinking of the wonderful memories of their time together. Of course, there were also tensions within the group, but looking back, Mary Wilson was always proud of what they had achieved at a time when Black America was fighting for civil rights.
We were there when there were so many social changes in America, because black people weren't really citizens until 1964. The Civil Rights Bill was passed.
Over the years, she continued to perform. She wrote, she even helped change the law to stop imposters using the names of classic groups. And she was also looking forward to celebrations of the Supremes' 60th anniversary, a reminder of a time when the charts were ruled by 3 proud, confident, glamorous black women. As Mary Wilson said, yes, she was the dream girl.
Mary Wilson, who's died at the age of 76. That's it. Now on BBC One, it's time for the news where you are. Have a very good night.